presume everyone has already the slides that we distributed yesterday. As you can see from the slide, our agenda today, there are 4 points that we are going to discuss. And this is the beginning of the workhorse. If you remember last week, I mentioned in macroeconomics, basically there are 3 parts that we are going to cover in this semester. The first part is really the workhorse of the macroeconomics. And the second part is basically about the financial sector, because the weakness of the existing macroeconomics is that they are always assuming that in the financial sector everything is perfect, everything is, there's no friction and so forth. And that's why the second part of this semester, we intentionally deviate from the textbook, and I'm going to insert the financial friction, okay? And then the third part is to connect the macroeconomics and the welfare issues, which is very relevant for developing countries like Indonesia. So today is really the beginning of the first part, which is the workhorse. Now, before I start, the workhorse is something like the fundamental. Just think about you're building a house. You don't know whether in the future you're going to make it 2 stories or 3 stories or 4 stories house. But you need to strengthen your foundation of the house. So the workhorse is really the foundation. What does that mean? That means no matter what that you are going to use in the future, the macroeconomics, you must know this. So this is like the necessary conditions, okay? So today, the first workhorse is really the number 1 issue in macroeconomics, and that is how to generate what is called the aggregate demand. Okay? I'm sure you all took microeconomics, and of course in microeconomics they teach you about demand and supply in partial equilibrium. But in macroeconomics, when we talk about demand, we're talking about aggregate demand. So it's not a firm's demand or something. Okay. Now, of course, the concept that this is aggregate rather than private, seemingly easy. Seemingly, what you do is just summing up all the demand that you learn in microeconomics, sum all the economic agents. The answer is, of course, no, because the aggregate demand in macroeconomics is very different from the demand that you learn in microeconomics. Okay? And that's why please pay attention how we derive the aggregate demand in macroeconomics. Now, the first part is really about equilibrium. I hope you still remember from last week that the story of macroeconomics is essentially a story of equilibrium and disequilibrium. So we start with the equilibrium, and there are 3 markets that we are going to cover today. The first is the goods market, the second is the money market, and the third is the financial market. Okay. Now, in the goods market, the starting point is really, which I'm sure you already learned in the pengantar macroeconomy, and that is the simple aggregate demand equation. That is, the GDP or output is nothing but the summation of consumption, capital C, investment, government spending, and net export. So that is really the essence of the aggregate demand. So let me open my PowerPoint so that you can let's see. Now I remember I have to do something. Here, then here. Okay, I think this is the one. All right, so that is the equation that I was talking about, the summations of the consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. So EX is the export, IM is the import. And of course, you know that there are 2 other approaches how to calculate GDP, and that is the income approach and production approach. But For macroeconomics, we are focusing on the number one, which is the expenditure of goods. Okay. Now, this kind of a basic equation leads to the first important concept in macroeconomics, and that is multipliers. Okay. From the title, you can guess what does multiplier mean. The multiplier comes from the word multiply. So, meaning what? Meaning if you put 100, the results will be more than 100. That's the essence of the word multiply, right? So that is essentially the same here. If you increase the autonomous demand, I'm going to explain in a few seconds what is autonomous demand. So if you increase the autonomous demand, okay, then the total output will increase more than whatever the additional autonomous demand that you put in the system. Okay? So if your autonomous demand increased by 100, then the GDP will increase more than 100. So that is the concept of multiplier. And you can, you can see, you can see from, hold on. Okay, so you can see from these equations that you started from the consumption function at the bottom there, and you can see from, for example, the consumption is a function of y over t. So t is the taxes, so y over t is basically disposable income. That's the income after you pay the taxes, right? And you insert that into the equation, and through simple algebra, then you will get this basically. Okay? So this equation that I'm focusing on here now, okay? Now you notice here that this left part, so this part, can you see my mouse moving here?
Yes, you can see it clearly.
Okay, you can see, right? So this is what I'm focusing in. This is the multiplier, and the right hand side, which is this guy, that is called the autonomous spending. So the definition of the autonomous spending is basically none of these variables are really determined by the y, by the output, and that's why they call it autonomous spending. Okay, so that means if you increase this right hand side by 100, you know that the GDP of the economy will increase more than 100. How do we know how much more? Well, we have to calculate the multiplier here, 1 over 1 minus C1. So now if you recall the consumption function here, this is C1. So what is C1 there? C1 is basically the marginal propensity to consume. That is how much you increase your consumption if there is an increase in your disposable income. That's essentially the C1 here. Okay? So 1 over 1 minus marginal propensity to consume, that is your multiplier. And since marginal propensity to consume is less than 1, then you can imagine the multiplier has to be always bigger than 1. Because if you look at the denominator, 1 minus less than 1, okay, that means the whole denominator is less than 1. So 1 over anything less than 1 equals to bigger than 1. And that is the concept of multiplier. So I hope you understand now, the word multiply, which is the origin of multiplier, is essentially talking about that. Now in macroeconomics, many sort of user or policy analysis is using this concept of multiplier because, let's say if the economy is in recession and you want to increase the Y, the output, then you can imagine if the multiplier is high, then why don't you increase the autonomous spending? For example, why don't government increase their spending? Because G is government. Or why don't they increase the investment? I increase. Or you can reduce the tax because this is negative, right? So the whole idea is that by doing that, policymakers know that the impact on the output is more than proportional. More than proportional from whatever amount that you inject into the economy. Okay? So that's the first important concept, that is multiplier. Now, the next one is in terms of how this multiplier operate in the system. Okay, so if you look at this chart, basically what I said earlier, suppose you increase the autonomous spending, so from 0A, you increase to 0B. So that means the increase of the autonomous spending is AP, okay? This guy. Now you can see from this chart is that the output will increase from E to F. Now you notice that the distance between A and B is smaller than the distance between E to F. So that is the essence of multiplier. So you increase this amount, but you get higher GDP. So now you understand, sometimes if you read the newspaper, government want to increase the spending, okay? With this G, capital G here, right? So if government want to increase the spending, of course in the back of their mind is that they expect that the Indonesian GDP will increase more than whatever the amount of the spending, okay? So that is the first concept of the aggregate demand, which is only part of it, because in a few minutes I'm going to explain the other part.